In this video, we will discuss Chapter 1 of GST Act Australia. Please find Chapter in Volume 1 of GST Act from page number 127. For more videos on GST Act Australia, please check our previous videos in GST playlist. Chapter 1 of GST Act is an introduction to GST legislation. In Chapter 1 there are 4 different divisions. Division 1 is preliminary. Division 2 is overview of GST legislation. Division 3 is about defined terms. Division 4 is about status of guides and other non-operative material. We will learn all about 4 divisions mentioned before in Chapter 1. Chapter 1 brushes over just basic information. There is a lot more to learn about mentioned terms and chapters, which will be covered in later sections of this playlist. For instant updates to these videos, please subscribe to our channel. Division 1 is about basic induction to GST Act. Division 1 of Chapter 1 explains that 1. The name of GST Act 1999 may be cited as a new tax system, Goods and Services Tax, Act 1999. 2. The GST Act commences on July 1, 2000. 3. The Parliament of Australia acknowledges that a. Australian government will introduce GST legislation to provide revenue from GST. b. Revenue from GST will be granted to the states, the Australian Capital Territory, and the Northern Territory. c. Commonwealth will maintain the rate and base of the GST in accordance with the Agreement on Principles for the Reform of Commonwealth State Financial Relations endorsed at the Special Premiers Conference in Canberra on November 13, 1998. So in other words, Australian government has 3 major roles in GST legislation. 1. To introduce GST legislation to generate revenue. 2. To grant GST-generated revenue to states. 3. To maintain rate and base of GST. Next, Part 1 to 4 of Division 1 states. States and territories are bound by the GST law. The GST law binds the Crown, that is Australian government, in right of each of the states, of the Australian Capital Territory and of the Northern Territory. However, it does not make the Crown liable to be prosecuted for an offence. Now we will have a look on Division 2 of Chapter 1. Division 2 is an overview of GST legislation. Division 2 explains that this act is about GST. GST Act begins, in Chapter 2, with the basic rules about the GST, and then sets out in Chapter 3 the exemptions from the GST, and in Chapter 4 the special rules that can apply in particular cases. It concludes with definitions and other interpretative material. Note, the GST is imposed by 6 acts, the most important of which are a. The New Tax System, Goods and Services Tax Imposition, General, Act 1999, and b. The New Tax System, Goods and Services Tax Imposition, Customs, Act 1999, and c. The New Tax System, Goods and Services Tax Imposition, Excise, Act 1999. In summary, GST Act begins in Chapter 2, sets out in Chapter 3, special rules in Chapter 4. GST concludes with definitions and other interpretative material. Let's have a look what we will find in these chapters mentioned before. In Chapter 2, the basic rules, Chapter 2, we will find the basic rules for the GST, including when and how the GST arises, and who is liable to pay it. When and how input tax credits arise, and who is entitled to them. How to work out payments and refunds of GST. When and how the payments and refunds are to be made. The exemptions, Chapter 3. Chapter 3 sets out the supplies and importations that are GST-free or input taxed. The special rules, Chapter 4. Chapter 4 has special rules which, cases, have the effect of modifying the basic rules in Chapter 2. Note, there is a checklist of special rules at the end of Chapter 2, in Part 2 to 8. So in other words, we can't make our own special rules. Miscellaneous, Chapter 5. Chapter 5 deals with miscellaneous matters. Interpretative provisions, Chapter 6. Chapter 6 contains the dictionary, which sets out a list of all the terms that are defined in this act. It also sets out the meanings of some important concepts and rules on how to interpret this act. Just to inform you that we have explained all Chapter 6 including GST Dictionary in our previous videos of this videos. Please check it out to make your learning more enjoyable. Administration. collection and recovery provisions in the Taxation Administration Act 1953. Schedule 1 to the Taxation Administration Act 1953 contains provisions relating to the administration of the GST, and to collection and recovery of amounts of GST. Now let's have a look on Division 3 of Chapter 1. Division 3 explains about defined terms. When defined terms are identified. 1. Many of the terms used in the law relating to the GST are defined. 2. Most defined terms in this act are identified by an asterisk appearing at the start of the term. That goes with the asterisk contains a signpost to the dictionary definitions starting at section 195-1. That is page numbers 171 to 217 of GST Act Volume 2. When terms are not identified. 1. Once a defined term has been identified by an asterisk, later occurrences of the term in the same subsection are not usually asterisked. 2. Terms are not asterisked in the non-operative material contained in this act. We will look at non-operative material in Division 4. To learn more about difference between operative material and non-operative material, please watch video number 1 of this playlist. 3. The following basic terms used throughout the act are not identified with an asterisk. Common definitions that are not asterisked: item term. 1. Acquisition. 2. Amount. 3. Commissioner. 4. Entity. 5. Goods. 6. GST. 7. Import. 8. Indirect tax zone. 9. Individual. 10. Input tax credit. 11. Supply. 12. Tax period. 13. Thing. 14. U. However, above-mentioned 14 terms are contained in GST Dictionary. Some of meanings of words in GST Dictionary you have to find in other relevant legislations. Please check our previous videos. We have explained all about GST Dictionary words. Identifying the defined term in a definition within a definition. The defined term is identified by bold italics. Division 4 of Chapter 1 explains about status of guides and other non-operative material. Non-operative material. In addition to the operative provisions themselves, this act contains other material to help you identify accurately and quickly the provisions that are relevant to you and to help you understand them. This other material falls into 2 main categories. Explanatory sections. 1 category is the explanatory section in many divisions. Under the section heading, what this division is about. A short explanation of the division appears in boxed text. Explanatory sections form part of this act but are not operative provisions. In interpreting an operative provision, explanatory sections may only be considered for limited purposes. They are set out in section 182 to 10. Please check video number 1 for more details. Other material. The other category consists of materials such as notes and examples. These also form part of the act. They are distinguished by type size from the operative provisions, except for formulas, but are not kept separate from them. In conclusion, what we have learned from Chapter 1. In Division 1 we have learned proper name of GST Act, date of commencement, roles and responsibilities of Australian Parliament, Australian Government, and States in GST Act. In Division 2 we have learned in what chapters GST Act begins, sets out, special rules, conclusion, definition and other interpretative material in GST legislation. In Division 2 we have learned about basic details about what we will find in Chapter 2, Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5, Chapter 6. In Division 3 we have learned about how to identify defined term and definition, when terms are identified, and when terms are not identified. In Division 4 we have discussed about status of guides and other non-operative materials such as non-operative material, explanatory sections, and other materials. That was it for this video. Stay tuned for more videos on GST. If you wish to receive videos straight to your account, please press the bell icon. Based on what we discussed so far, please find a question and answer activity on screen. If you require a free digital copy of question sheet, please feel free to contact us. Completing this exercise will help you to understand and remember a lot better. You can use this video to answer or go to GST Act. Question number 1. What is proper name cited for GST Act? 2. What date did GST Act commenced? 3. What is purpose of Crown in relation to GST Act Australia? 4. Is Crown liable for offence in relation to GST? 5. At which chapter GST Act starts? 6. Name all the chapters in GST Act and their purpose. 7. What is difference between identified and non-identified terms in GST Act and their purpose? 8. What is difference between operative and non-operative provisions? Thanks again for your time. If you find value in this video, you can support us by subscribing or sharing. Please do share your feedback as this will help us to improve.